Hey everybody, it's time for another abstract watercolor video. Today I'm playing in one of my watercolor journals. It's from Kunst und Papier. It's quite an old one and I'm on the last pages here. It's not my favorite, but it's also not a bad. Well, of all the watercolor journals I have used, this is one of my favorites. But in general, I'm not a big fan of watercolor paper, especially when it comes to sketchbooks, because every time I get a watercolor sketchbook, I'm not happy with the paper. You can buy some really nice watercolor paper open stock, which is not in a sketchbook, but it's very expensive. That's the other thing. So I usually like smoother papers and papers that don't soak up the paint as much. And that is what watercolor paper sometimes do, especially if it's a cotton one. This is, I think, 25% cotton. It has some kind of texture, and what I like about it is that it does not soak up the paints. They stay quite vibrant on this paper, but I don't like that the paper is buckling so much. So that's a little bit of an issue with this journal. I'm just playing today with the My Liang watercolors. This is the palette I've used a lot during the past weeks, and I combine them today with the core watercolors, and these are watercolors that have some high flow, which means that the pigment pushes away other pigments. And I really like, I used it here. The quinacridone gold is from core, and I bet you saw the effect it had. I like to use them combined with other watercolors. I don't like the core watercolors on their own, because when every pigment has the property to push away other pigments, you will end up with a little war on your paper, I would say. And you never know which pigment is a bit stronger than the other. And when I use it combined with other watercolors, I can be quite sure that the cores are the stronger ones and will push away the others. And I use that on purpose to create certain effects. Today I'm bringing in a different brush. I have a little fern brush here, which is not the best quality, but it makes a really, really lovely mark on the page, and I really like this. And I thought I would integrate this into this spread. I can't tell you the exact color names because I'm working with that big palette. I love this watercolor palette. It's the best, not so pricey palette I have or I've ever tested. And yeah, perfect palette. If you are starting out, if you don't have any watercolors, I would recommend this. There is a link in the video description. The core watercolors I've used the quinacridone gold, and I might use some other colors, but not a lot. And I don't have them named, so I have no idea which are the exact color names. With the core watercolors, I found that some of them dried out in the tube. I bought them in little tubes, and there was one, they started drying out. They got really, really hard. And I was afraid that they will dry out fully because I had some cheap Arteza gouache paints in tubes, and they completely dried in the tube. There was a hard block in that, and I was really afraid that this would happen with the core watercolors as well. I think they use a too thin material. It's a very thin metal, and maybe that's the reason. And that's awful because the paints are super expensive, and then you buy them and then they dry out in the tube. It's then hard to get them out. You have to cut the tube, and then you don't know where to put that block of paint. And then I decided to squeeze them all empty into pans, and I haven't named them. So I don't know the names. I know the quinacridone gold because it's a popular color and I like to use it a lot. There are I think, more quinacridone colors in this set from them, and yeah, I'm not sure which colors there are. I'm sorry. I try to increase the contrast of my painting by bringing in some darker colors, and I'm mixing a blue with that quinacridone red, gold, and that gives me a really lovely greenish color, and I really like that. I just play intuitively. I use the water to give me certain effects. That's what you all discover when you play a lot, when you experiment, when you just paint and do things. And don't always go for the goal that the finished painting has to look like something nice. Sometimes it's just good to sit down and play with the materials you have, combine them. But I think I mention this in almost every video I do when I do some kind of painting videos. That's important, just to learn how your colors work. And often I always think about it like that when I start, especially in my sketchbook or art journal. I just think about playing, and then we will see what happens, because the play part is the fun part for me in art, and that's why I do it. So I always use this as the purpose doing it. The page is almost full, and I will let the first layer dry, and then I will add a second layer on top, not fully, to just bring in more depth. I did some watercolor videos recently for my members, so if you are into watercolor, if you want to see more abstract watercolor paintings with a little bit of mixed media, you can check that out. I will link up our contents page in the description, where you can find an overview of all the video lessons that are up for members. Another cool thing, I'm teaching in the Mastering Mixed Media Expo 2026. It's hosted by Willowing Arts. I bet you know her. There is also some information linked up in the video description and over on my blog. Yeah, it's a free online class. You can join it on that day it happens, and it doesn't cost you anything. There are a bunch of amazing artists sharing their knowledge, sharing a class there. Definitely, you don't want to miss this. I let my page dry, and coming back here, adding another layer, I'm mixing that dark blue I've been using together with that quinacridone gold from Golden to create that greenish color I really like. And then I'm going to add a few more layers on top of that. With the second layer, I try to not overwork it. And I also try to consider a little bit where I layer, so I don't create muddy colors. But don't be afraid of muddy colors, because sometimes a neutral area can be quite calming next to a very powerful or chaotic area. So I think it's just maybe necessary to not create a full piece with a muddy color. But if you are just placing something in a certain area and then you get a more muted color, I would not consider this as a problem, because it always, a neutral tone always lets the other brighter tones shine a little. I'm trying to just make some other shapes here, another kind of pattern on the background. I really like to experiment with that. And there is also a video up for members where I share some vintage botanical books that I like, and we're flipping through them a little bit, and where I get a lot of inspiration from regarding botanicals and also the patterns I make. Sometimes I just go in with a little bit of water to just reactivate the watercolors that I've put down in the first layer, and that will also give you some interesting effects. And that sometimes works better or not so good, depending on the paper I'm using. That's also something that you'll just learn when you play. And there are some things I intuitively know because I did them a lot. So it's always just play with your materials, no matter if the outcome is good or if you like the outcome. Um, it's so the taste of people is so different. I sometimes post a picture on Instagram and people love it, and I got tons of comments, new followers, and when I posted it, I thought, oh, well, that's not the best, but I will post it anyways. That's not my favorite, and it's so different what people like and what you like. And some other tip, if you do a painting or a page and you think, ah, that's not pretty, I don't like it, come back the next day and have a look at it. Sometimes your mind changes, your point of view is different, and then you might like it. And if you still say, oh no, that's not good, find some things that you like in this painting and note that down, and then use these things in your next painting. I let my page dry completely, and here I'm going in with a Posca pen and make a simple botanical shape. I do this without pre-drawing because I do these simple shapes a lot and I feel quite safe doing them without pre-drawing, but of course feel free to just use a pencil, pre-draw your image, and then just erase it or just leave the pencil lines. That might also be a really nice effect. I'm using a blue pencil. I wish I had a darker one, but that's the only fine liner in blue I have. And it's not very visible at the moment, but I will make it a bit more visible later in the process by coloring in the leaves with white, and I will show you some different options what you can use for that, and then they will pop up more from the background. I always try not to place the focal point directly into the center because I feel that looks weird. I like having this off center just in another space. I wanted to bring in a dot pattern into these darker circles, and instead of using a white Posca pen, what I normally do, I thought I would use these little bottles. I filled them myself, and this is some flash paint in there in the color ivory. I'm just testing here if this is going to work out, and that does work. I mixed these didn't mix them. I filled these paints into the tinier bottles because I really like them in my sketchbook, and the paints come in glass jars and it's really uncomfortable using them. For me, I prefer tubes. So I filled those little bottles so I can easily use the paint, squeeze it out on my sketchbook page directly, and then paint with it, play with it. I usually paint them with my fingers, and these are vinyl paints and they dry completely matte. They are similar to an acrylic gouache, I would say, color wise. They do not, when you work with them with water, they do not blend as nicely as a gouache does, but the finish looks like gouache and it's permanent, so it does not come off with the water, so it's like an acrylic gouache. And I really like this because it's matte and you can draw over the top, especially that's important in my sketchbook, that I can draw over the top with for example, color pencils or crayons or soft pastels. And if I would use acrylics, that wouldn't work. And of course, I could use acrylic gouache for that, and I sometimes do. But I really like the flash paints, and they are from Europe, easy to get for me. So yeah, and I think that dots worked out quite lovely. I will let that dry and then we will finish the page. My pattern is dry and here I'm coloring in the leaves and I'm using the Derwent drawing in white. That usually works quite nice if you have a darker background, but the background today is not super dark. It's quite light compared to some other areas on the page. And then I decided maybe I would use a Neocolor, which also works quite good, a white Neocolor crayon. It's a Neocolor too. You could use a Neocolor one instead. I don't have the Neo Arts in white. That would be also nice to use. What I don't like about the Neocolors or any other crayon, that they are not very precise because they are so chunky. And you can sharpen them, of course, but you lose a lot of materials. I usually save the sharpened stuff. I don't know the word for it. I just save it and then maybe I would make some pigment mix with it and put it into a watercolor pen. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But usually I try not to sharpen these crayons. And my chunk would also be too small to sharpen it. That makes it a bit better, the new color. Of course, I could have used a Posca marker, but I thought that might be too hard. The Posca will cover a lot. It's very white, very intense, and I thought that might be too hard for that page, so I didn't use this. And you could use a white watercolor, but often the white watercolors are not very white. And then you have to be sure that your watercolor is opaque. The Art Graph Tailor Shape Crayon in white would be my first choice if I would have used watercolors. And what you can also use is an oil pastel. A white oil pastel will do a really nice job, but you have the same problem that you will have with the Neocolor. It's quite chunky. I wanted to draw something in white onto that big pink area. The first fine liner didn't really work. You have to shake these really, really well to get an opaque line. I'm sure the fine liner is okay, but I have to shake it a lot more. So I used the other one and I just draw in a similar leaf so it looks cohesive and in white to make it pop from that pinkish background. I let that liner sit a little bit and then I go over it again to make it more visible. I'm making a few more marks with a Neocolor crayon, and that color is, I think it's one from the limited edition sets and a color that is not available open stock, and it's a really lovely ochre color and it matches perfectly that quinacridone tone from the quinacridone gold. I'm really upset that these are not available open stock. I would love having some of them as replacements because I use them quite a lot in my sketchbook, and especially some of the new colors are really nice. Here I'm just cleaning my white oil pastel because I wanted to bring that in on top of that of the leaf. I will color the leaves in with it. It's a bit hard because it's so big. And then I will redraw the outline with the Posca pen. Of course, you have to be a little bit careful not to run the Posca pen through the oil pastel because that can ruin it when some of that comes into the nib. So I'm a little bit careful about that. And I think that's perfect for the painting. It's a good amount of white standing out on the page. And for that leaf that I've drawn over the pink area, I'm going to fill that in with some translucent metallic gold. There is a range of metallic colors in this My Liang watercolor set. I usually do not use a lot metallics, but it's really lovely to have some sometimes. And I just color in that leaf, and I think I will make a few marks with the metallics on the page in the dark blue area at the top left, just to stay cohesive and bring that color in another spot. Yes, and that is my page for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more, check out my YouTube membership, and don't forget to sign up for the Mastering Mixed Media class. I wish you a lovely rest of the week, and we will see us next time. Bye.